obvious reason that we are almost nearing the uh, end of the semester. Fine. Okay. Uh, Let us start the class. Okay. So um, now we come to the next of the root beverages, which is wine. I think you know that wine is made by fermentation of uh, any sugar-rich material. Now, what is the difference between wine and beer? Is that beer is obtained from malted beverages, and beer is basically a fermentation process where uh, starch is a substrate, and by the process of malting, starch is broken down to maltose and glucose polymers, which is then reacted upon by either Saccharomyces casparensis, as the case may be. Now, in the case of wine, it is a conventional or a traditional fermentation where a sugar-rich product, that is basically fruits, are being used in the case of wine fermentation. So basically, again, though it started with grapes, we have a lot the other sources of fruits or sugars can also be possible. For example, we have pineapple wine, we have cashew wine. In fact, we can also have tamarind wine, okay, because these are some of the documented what to say there is definite literature regarding wine even from tamarind, because the basic thing is these substrates have a rich amount of easily fermentable sugar, that is glucose or sucrose. That is the main thing. Unlike, as I already told you, the case of beer, where the substrate has to be broken down and then subsequently fermented. In the case of wine, the substrate is readily fermentable sugar. So basically, in the case of grapes, the grapes are first taken. Of course, they are washed. They are destocked, crushed, and then the fermentation starts. In this case, normally to prevent the action of wild yeast which may be present, a small amount of sulfur dioxide is added to kill the yeast. After that, then the yeast of interest is then added. So after this, then once the fermentation goes on, after say around 7 days or something like that, the juice that is obtained, the alcohol obtained is then pressed for removal of the liquid part from what is called as the pomage, that is the skin, the part which is the skin, seeds, and other material. After this, then you go for a second round of fermentation. Now, this fermentation has nothing to do with the conversion of sugar to alcohol, but then this is involves the what is called as a malolactic acid fermentation, where the uh, other acids are converted to lactic acid and esters. This is to bring down the acidity and improve the flavor components of the final product. Okay. This is then subsequently filtered, cooled, filtered to remove the suspended matter, which includes your broken down products of pectin, etc., proteins, etc. And finally, you get a clear product which is pasteurized. Okay. I think you know grape is also the binomial nomenclature is Vitis vinifera. So the process of wine manufacture is also called as vinification. Actually, it started, as I already told you, with grapes. But the same thing can also be followed for any other fruit-based sugar. So basically, the equipments used include a crusher or a destemmer, then the fermentation and storage bar, pumps, then hoses, filters, refrigerant equipments, etc. So these are the some of the equipments used. Okay, so first step is destemming and crushing, where the stalks are removed and they are slightly crushed. These tasks can be performed by the same machine, which is a crusher or a destemmer. Now, the removal of the stem and then slight crushing. Normally, again, conventionally, once upon a time, we had normally, particularly in the European countries, this crushing is made as sort of a big mega event where people use their feet to stomp on it to make it to crush the grapes. So that is also there. Fine. So the grapes are then fed by a hopper into a rotating slotted cylinder. So as this rotates, the berries pass through the slots, leaving the stalks behind. This is the construction of the bee stalker or destalker. Okay. So the stalks are removed and expelled from the machine. The grape berries are passed through a series of rollers, which are adjusted to given a pressure in order to release the juice. This is the large scale method of industrial method of doing it. After this, the resultant mixture of grape juice with the seed and the pulp is what is called as the must. So the must has grape, seed, the pulp, the skin, as also the seed. This is called as must, and this is then treated with sulfur dioxide to prevent, as I already told you, the external contamination. Okay. So after this, you have what is called as a chaptalization. What is chaptalization? Now, conventionally, if you consider the what to say, when you consider the uh, total sugar or the hydrolyzable fermentable sugars in the case of grapes, it will be somewhere around, say, uh, maximum 15 to 17. Now, to increase the amount of sugar present. Now, basically, I think you already know that for the thumb rule is that for every one molecule of sugar present, half a molecule of alcohol is obtained. So, when you consider a product like wine, if you start with 14 or 15 degree Brix or 15% fermentable sugars, you will end up having a product which has around 7% alcohol. And this is also called as dry wine because all the sugar is fermented. But this sometimes is not desirable as people might also like a bit sweet taste. That is one. The second thing is that to ensure that the final product has a uniform alcohol content of around 11%, what is done? So if you need to have a 11% alcohol, I need to have a starting material of 22 degree Brix sugar. Other thing is, if I need some more, some more of sweetness, I need to increase the sugar concentration further. So this is what is called as chaptalization, where addition of sugar is added to the must in the early stages of fermentation. Basically, as I said, this is to increase the alcohol content and to ensure that there is a uniformity obtained. How do I do it? After crushing of the juice, I check for the degree Brix. To this, then is added the appropriate amount of sucrose to increase the degree Brix to around 24 to 26 degrees. So this will ensure that the final product will have somewhere around 11 to 12% of alcohol along with a certain amount of free sugars. So it is important that only the minimum necessary amount is added or further imbalance will be created. This is one thing. So what are the treatment that are done for the must? First thing is chaptalization, which is the addition of sugar. The second thing is acidification. What is acidification? I think even the last class or in the case of bakery, I never told that as the pH decreases to less than 4, the putrescent bacteria or the contaminating bacteria do not grow. In fact, any pH below 4.5, the growth of bacteria is lesser. So, when I'm going to bring down the pH by acidification, what I'm basically doing is that I'm selectively allowing only the yeast to grow, leaving behind the other unwanted or interfering microorganisms. So, addition of tartaric acid is the usual method employed. As I said, the basic aim is to reduce the pH for aiding the growth of yeast. Okay. This is reason if this is also necessary if the pH of the must is too high. Okay, so that is the pH of the must is too high in the sense that acidity is less. So this is to increase the acidity or bringing down the pH to ensure that the what to say, to ensure selective growth of uh, yeast over the other microorganisms. Okay. Deacidification is also uh, followed if the pH is low. Again, that depends on the type of the grapes that is obtained. You know, obviously, that some grapes are very acidic in nature. This might have an unacceptable later taste. So basically, around somewhere around 3.5 to 4 is the standard pH at which wine fermentation starts. Okay, this is not permitted in warmer regions of the European Union. Some of the materials that are added include calcium carbonate, potassium bicarbonate, potassium carbonate, etc. As you observe, some of these are what are called as mild alkalis. These are not like sodium hydroxide, etc. Similarly, if you see the acidification acidulants also, you only add tartaric acid or malic acid, which are again very mild acid form acids. Okay, so that is the other thing. Fine. Of course, yeast, yeast normally is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And apart from that, to ensure the growth of yeast, you have yeast nutrients, which include a group of vitamins as also uh, ammonium sulfate, etc., the nitrogen source. Because you have a sugar source, to improve the growth of yeast, then you need a nitrogen source and vitamins. And then hence you have uh, ammonium sulfate, etc. As I said, diammonium phosphate is added at a rate of 200 mg per liter. This is to ensure that all the sugars are fermented out and to stop the fermentation during ferment and to prevent the formation of hydrogen sulfide. Thiamine is added to help increase the yeast population. So diammonium phosphate and thiamine are added as yeast nutrients to increase the growth of yeast. And normally, if you consider wooden vats were the conventional, what to say, conventional uh, vessels, okay, or containers that were used long back for the fermentation of yeast, so for the fermentation, for the wine fermentation. But then, with the advancement of technology and moving over to a large scale production, we have the inclusion of stainless steel. Stainless steel SS304 is conventionally for red wines, and the better resistant SS316 for red and white wines. As you know very well that SS316 is resistant to acid corrosion also. Okay. So stainless steel vats may be open top or closed, that is, which has opening at the top, or it can be also closed and closed with a sealable hatch lid. This is to ensure that a perfect anaerobic conditions are maintained in the vat. So variable capacity vats are available and are useful even when only partly filled. Because again, in the case of any fermentation process, there is need to be a certain amount of headspace required for the gases to escape. Okay, so normally the level of filling is somewhere around half to 60%, because when carbon dioxide is generated, carbon dioxide has to occupy the headspace and move out. One, the production of carbon dioxide ensures a greater level of anaerobic conditions. Okay. The other thing is, if I'm going to full lid, pressure will be created which can blow up the lid. So normally what happens is that these have a floating metal lid in place by an inflatable plastic tire at the perimeter. Now, what is the significance of it? During the course of fermentation, okay, uh, carbon dioxide is released, and this will try to push up the skin and some of the pulp onto the surface. Now, when the skin is up to the surface, there is headspace above it, and this will induce unwanted contamination by the aerial microorganism. Now, aerial here is that inside the vat, it is closed. So, to ensure, and that is one thing. The other thing is the skin, particularly in the case of red wine, has a good amount of anthocyanins, and this adds to the color and the quality of the wine. So to ensure a greater extraction of the anthocyanins in the alcohol medium, what is done is that frequently then, okay, the metal lid is pushed down. Now, what will happen if the metal lid is pushed down? Those floaters, right, like the skin things, are pushed inside. This will ensure a proper mixing of the juice with the skin, thereby enhancing the extraction of anthocyanins from the skin. Okay. The fermentation of red wine takes place with grape solids present. Okay, as I already told you, this is all the thing. Fermentation can be fast initially, but then later, because of the obvious effect of alcohol, the on yeast, the rate of the reaction slows down. The normal range of concentration is around 11 to 14.5%, as I already told you. So only for this, then the normal degree breaks of the starting material, the must is somewhere around 22 to 30%. Sugar, 30-degree breaks. So during red wine making, fermentation may begin at 20 degrees centigrade, but the temperature may rise to 30 to 32 degrees centigrade because the fermentation generates heat. Heat ceases to work if the temperature rises above 35 degrees centigrade. That's what I think you know. That is why in the case of even red fermentation, we take care that the temperature does not increase above 28 degrees centigrade. So to ensure that then you have normally this maintained under cold conditions or a jacketed vessel with the temperature control being done. Okay. Good color extraction requires warm fermentation, but then cooler fermentation aid the growing of yeast colonies and give higher alcoholic degrees. So warmer the temperature, lesser is the time taken for fermentation. Warmer here means that ideal temperature is 28 degrees centigrade. Warmer means something around beyond 30 or 32 degrees centigrade. Of course, you know very well if the temperature goes beyond 35 degree or 36 degrees centigrade, yeast dies out. So the play of temperature or the manipulation of temperature is between 28 degrees centigrade or 27 degrees centigrade till 35 degrees centigrade. Okay. So a winemaker may decide to start a vat fairly cool at around 20 degrees centigrade, but during the course of fermentation, temperature rises and it reaches around 30 degrees centigrade to aid a better extraction of the color. Later then, the vat may be cooled to 25 degrees centigrade to ensure complete fermentation to dryness. What do you mean by dryness? Complete conversion of sugar to alcohol. Dry wine is one which has no sugar but then full alcohol. Full alcohol here is something like 11 to 13% alcohol. So cooling equipment may be required for larger vats. As I said, normally wines can be pumped through heat exchangers to reduce or increase the temperature. Okay. Stainless steel tanks are now commonly wrapped with water or glycol cooling jackets. This is a much easier way to ensure a temperature. That is the way we do for your earthen pots and things like that, where we cover it with a wet cloth. Similarly, I can use a jacketed vessel for for ensuring a cooler temperature. Okay, where the water passed in the outside jacket has a temperature of around 30 degrees, 25 to 30 degrees centigrade. And normally, to ensure that the temperature is maintained uniform, a slight stirring can be done as and when it is happening. So that is what is essential. Okay. Uh, okay. Extraction, traditional process of red wine is for the grape mass to be fermented in open vat. The solids and skin, as I already you, rise to the surface of the carbon dioxide and create a floating cap. So, as I already told you, this is a disadvantage because this can lead to other unwanted type of fermentation. To prevent it only, you need to use the push downer or whatever it is to ensure a proper mixing of the skin with uh, the other must. Okay. As I already told you, acetic acid bacteria thrive in the aerial thing. So prevent that. Then this is done. So this is called as remontage. Where what is done is that what is remontage? What I do, I have the vessel. Okay. So sorry. Okay. Uh, so I have the vessel. Maybe a cylindrical conical vessel as the case may be. Okay. Something like this. Now, what I do is that I take the uh, juice from the bottom and circulate it to the top. Now, what is going to happen in that case? There will be the skin at the top, so that will get wet. So this ensure, and this also ensures the proper circulation of the the must, which ensures that you have the yeast what to say, meeting a newer raw material as the fermentation proceeds. Okay. This technique of pig gauge is another method is remontage is one thing, that is pumping from the bottom to the top and wetting or recirculation in our conventional term. The second thing is pig gauge. What is pig gauge? As I already told you, I just pull down the lid. So what will happen? This lid uh, now this lid, what will happen? This is the cover. Now this will have uh, okay, something like this. Okay, so basically the lid will have something like this. Okay. Okay. Now what is going to happen is that when this is pulled down, okay, then now your screen will be somewhere here. Okay, so your skin will be here. Okay. So when I'm going to push this down, what happens is this will get inside the solution. So this is what we call as pig gauge. Okay. So vats can be fitted with mechanical pickage. In many wineries, submerging the cap is done by hand with wooden paddles or sticks or even the feet. That is also that is you just push it by hand. The skin gets inside. Okay. Depending on the style required, wine may be left to soak with the skin after completion of the alcoholic fermentation or extracted. Now, what are the two types? One you have a red wine and white wine. What is red wine? Red wine is one where the color is red. White wine is wine which has no color. Now, what is the difference between these two? In the case of red wine, the skin along the entire must, no, the pulp, the skin, everything is subjected to fermentation. In the case of white wine, what is happening is the skin is removed. So what happens? There is lesser extraction of the color or there is no extraction of the color. So the color is a bit towards the white rather than the conventional reddish pink color of wine. Okay. Mm, now, uh, this is what it is that this is the first step of fermentation. The maceration will vary from 2 or 3 days up to 28 days. Now, what is this procedure? During the course of fermentation, there is an extraction of the skin material, which include pectin, the breakdown of sugars, and also extraction of color. So this can take anywhere from 2 to 28 days. Okay. So basically, during this process of fermentation, color along with the tannins are extracted because tannins, again, these are polyphenols in nature. Okay. So after this, you have process of racking. What is racking? I think last time also I told. Racking is just the separation of the liquid part from the solid part, or basically it is a fermentation, or it is a filtration procedure. So in this filtration procedure, what is done? The solids, the seeds, and other things are separated from the alcohol that is done. So the free run juice is removed from the vat. Though the skin and other solids are left behind, these should be transferred to the press to obtain further juice. Now, what is it? First, first thing is whatever liquid possible is drained out. Now, the remaining skin and other things will still have some amount of liquid. So, this goes for a further filtration step. So, between 10 and 15% of the total juice comes from the pressing process. Free run juice has less tannin and usually considered superior to pressed juice. Now, the wine that we normally get is, one is the free run juice, which is directly coming. The second thing is the pressed juice. Pressed juice will contain whatever the other things, the skin part and other things. Okay, so racking is take place at various other times in the winemaking process. Why? This is basically a filtration process. If I want to have a clear wine, greater steps of racking are done, not at once, but then over a period of time. Okay. So juice is pressed. So more than one pressing may be carried out, and presses are controlled to exert varying levels of pressure. Why? For greater extraction of the tannins. Where do the tannin from the skin, from the seeds, etc. So you know normally that when the seeds are pressed, you get a very tart taste. So to prevent that, then if I only want the skin material and less amount of the bitterness or the tartness that's come uh, from the seeds, a lesser pressure is required. So depending on the tartness that is required, I can vary the pressure in the press. Okay. So you can have a basket press, a horizontal press, or a pneumatic press. Okay. So now what we have done, we have got the alcohol along with the must. So this is the primary fermentation. After the primary fermentation, we have what is called as the secondary fermentation, which is also called as the malolactic fermentation. That is malic acid, lactic acid fermentation. So in this case, yeast is not involved. Only thing changes here taking place is a esterification other process. That is, I have a high amount of, we have already seen that grape has a good amount of tartaric acid. And you know the taste of tartaric acid. If you do not know the taste, you can have a small amount of your tamarind and taste it. The basic taste of tamarind is because of tartaric acid. Okay, so that type of a tart taste is not desirable. So then in the final product, so what is done? The fermented must, this then subjected to a secondary fermentation. Here, as I said, this fermentation is the conversion of acid to esters and a modification of the flavor and the taste profile. So what is basically happening? Uh, Malic acid in apple is converted to lactic acid as found in milk. This is done by Lactobacillus, Leuconostoc, and Pediococcus. So the first step of fermentation is done by yeast. The second stage of fermentation is by the lactobacilli. Lactobacilli, obviously you know. So 1 gram of malic acid produces 0.67 grams of lactic acid and carbon dioxide. So this increases the carbon dioxide level of the wine, which again further preserves the wine. Okay. So malolactic acid fermentation can be induced by warming the vats or inoculating with strains of lactic acid bacteria, or it can be prevented by treating the wine with sulfur dioxide. Okay, though there are two options, either I go for malolactic acid fermentation. That basic advantage of malolactic fermentation is a coming down of the cutting down on the acidity. Okay. Uh, But if I want to continue, I get a buttery note and a very mild note. So that is the other thing with lactic acid fermentation is continued. After this, then blending is done. What is blending? Now, depending on the raw material, depending on the sugar content of the raw material, other things, I have a I have, lots which have variations in the sugar content of the final product, right? A wine which is totally dry, which has some amount of sugar, which has no color, which has color extracted, which is tart, etc. Now, basically, blending is done to maintain a standard level of tartness and color. Now, if you consider whether there is any standard for this, this standard is dated by the manufacturer. Any government agency standardize the alcohol content of wine only, which is around be 11 to 14%. But then other conditions like whether it has to have sugar, the tartness of it, etc., the color of it, etc., is decided by the individual manufacturers. Okay, so fine. The blending is to have a product with a greater than the sum of its part. What do you mean by that? That is, one might have a higher alcohol content, other will have a better sugar content, the third one have a better flavor, and the fourth one has the color. So mixing all these things, I get a final product which has good color, flavor, tartness, or lesser of it. The taste has also alcohol content. This then goes for a further set of maturation. I have a malolactic acid. First is the yeast fermentation or the carbon dioxide fermentation where alcohol is generated. The next step is malolactic acid fermentation where malic acid is converted to lactic acid. The third one is then maturation where a further modification of the flavor profile is done. Okay, this is to further modify the acidity and the tannin content. Okay, so this maturation can be between 9 and 22 months, and during this time, the wine undergoes a controlled oxygenation. How? By absorbing the. This is for the wine which has been fermented in wooden vats. It extracts the tannins and other products from the wood to give a characteristic taste and flavor. So barrel size has an effect on the maturation. The smaller the barrel size, the quicker is the maturation. And temperature, lower the temperature, slower is the maturation. After this, it is subjected to filtration and clarification. Filtration to remove the matter which can be something like your skin and other things. Clarification, further pectin and other things to be removed to give a clear wine. Okay. But then clarification and filtration have been lead to loss of color and volatile constituents because of the process of doing it. Because we have diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth is something like clay, and clay is known to be a decolorizing and what to say? It is known to strip the volatiles. Okay, fine. This is for clarification. Peptidases or proteases can be used to hydrolyze the proteins. So this will ensure that the what to say, the haze, those contributed the haze settle down, which can then subsequently be filtered. So microfiltration membranes are used in a tubular configuration. Refiltration is not required, but clarifying and stabilizing agents like bentonite are necessary. Why? Bentonite is what is called as a filter aid. What is the role of filter aid?
Sir, it will remove all the solid particles and will give a clear product.
Why? What is a filter aid actually?
So which helps filtering,
How?
like absorbing the solid particles.
How? It's a solid. How a solid will what to say into a solid or something. What is the theory of filter aids?
I'm not sure, sir, but absorption.
I'm not sure. You have to be sure. No? You are third year. You are almost finishing your third year. It's not for you, for the entire class. What is the maybe then I can have to give you a what to say maybe assignment. Give
Sir, it is
a
absorption.
note on filter aids and the role of filter aids in aiding filtration. No, because some of these things are important. Now, filter aids are used everywhere in the food industry. Okay. Now, what is a filter aid? What is the role of filter aid? What is filter cake resistance? How does filter aid? What is filter cake resistance?
So that is the cake formed by the retaining of solid particles on the filtrate. So it will give resistance to the flow of particles because it forms like a cake-like structure on the
Okay, what is the
surface.
meaning of filter aid? Okay, find it. I will give you as a what to say assignment. Okay, fine. So normally filter aids are used, and okay, so this is the thing. So conventionally, you have the filter aids and other things, or you can also use a microfiltration. Both of these things can be used to give a clear. Okay. Now, after that, you have what is called as a bottling. I think you know that. After bottling, you have I can have either in bottle pasteurization or sterilization or the other things. So cold sterile filtration, what is done? This does not require heat. It is filtered through a fine sheet or a membrane filter to remove all the yeast cells and then aseptically bottled in a sterile environment. So I use filtration as a mode of removing microorganisms from the mass. This is what is called as the cold filtration. Thermotic bottling is what we normally do, the in-bottle pasteurization. That is the wine or any other of the product. It can be even for juice, etc. It is bottled and then subjected to heat for a particular period of time. So temperature is the yeast are killed and the alcohol becomes toxic to any bacteria. Thereby then you have sterilization or pasteurization happening. Flash pasteurization is done, but this is pasteurization followed by bottle. The earlier one is for in bottle pasteurization. This is pasteurization followed by bottling. Okay. Tunnel pasteurization is wine is bottled to cold and passed through a heat tunnel where the sealed bottle was sprayed with hot water to a temperature of 82 degrees centigrade. So this is the other thing. Okay. So flash pasteurization is you pasteurize and then bottle, whereas tunnel or the thermotic bottling is you bottle and then pasteurize are subject to heat. Okay. I think we can stop it here. Any doubts?